Welcome to another episode of Kestra Out Loud podcast. I'm Mark Schoenbeck, your host for today. Super excited to be joined by Rainey Rogers of McKinney Wealth Management from, wait for it, McKinney, Texas. Rainey, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm glad you are here. Before we get to the topic at hand, share a little bit about who you are, about your firm, and then we'll talk about the fun stuff.
I'm Rainey Rogers. I grew up in McKinney, Texas. My wife and I knew each other since high school, and so we pretty much stayed there. And so I joined Principal Financial Group in 1986, and I was with them for 35 years.
Oh wow!
I was driving to Dallas most of the time, and then in 2013 I moved my firm to McKinney, Texas. I bought out a firm, and then last year, actually a year ago yesterday, I decided to join Kestra. And it's been a great move. So I took a retired contract from Principal. I was with them for 35 years. Had a great run with Principal, but I'm excited to be here.
We are excited you are here. And I remember just over a year ago with you being in our offices and talking and getting to know you and you getting to know about us. And you shared something with me that was of quite interest to me, which is outside of being a phenomenal financial advisor, you have a little side hustle and you are a beekeeper.
Yes, I'm a beekeeper. I've been beekeeping probably a little over 20 years now.
Okay. So go back 20 years. What got you into it? Why have you stuck with it 20 years?
It's really interesting. I have there was a guy at Principal who was Agent of the Year one year, and he owned a winery.
Oh, wow.
And so he would talk about how he would bring bottles of wine to clients. And I thought that'd be really cool to bring something that personalized to a client meeting or to an introduction or to leave it. And I don't drink wine. I don't do alcohol. So I tried to figure out what would be another way to leave a very personalized gift. And
right.
And then one summer we went up to Durango and I saw this live bees, this bee observation hive, and something connected. And I thought, it's honey. It's honey is what I need to get in and do.
So quickly, how many hives do you have now?
You know, beekeeping is really tough. It's very difficult to keep hives. And so right now I think I have 11. 6 months ago I had 13 or 14. And so they just kind of, it's difficult. So I always, probably between 8 and 12 is typically the range that I would have.
Okay, so go back 20. You're like, I need to do something personal. You fall in love with the bees. A common question, I have 4 hives currently. Mm-hmm. They fluctuate. So I'm still on the learning end of this side, but I often get asked a question like, well, how do I even get a hive? Like, how do you start if you're a new beekeeper and you want to get into it? How do I get a hive?
So a lot of people will think, oh, I just am going to buy a hive and stick a hive or 2 out there, or 3 or 4, and just kind of see how it goes. That's really what I thought I would do. And then I kind of analyzed it, and I'm like, I don't know the first thing about it. And that was really before any podcasts or books. I mean, I guess you could read books, but right. That was a big thing. And so
no
I
YouTube
found a class.
Then.
Do what?
There's no YouTube back then.
There was no YouTube. And so I took a class. And so I went for 5 months, 2 weekends, 2 Saturdays for 5 months. And I bought 4 hives.
Okay.
And you have to start out with 4 because 1 or 2 of them are going to die. It's like I say, it's very difficult.
Right.
But I started out with 4. And I think the first year I got 2.5 gallons.
Okay.
So, and then it's all been up from there.
My experience was different. I started with 2 hives, not having done as much homework as you had done, in the very first year, I got out of my first hive 4.5 gallons, and I'm like, holy smokes,
That's easy.
this is easy. 3 years later, I haven't made 4 gallons, or the bees haven't made 4 gallons of honey since, and I am up to 4 hives. So, so like really though, like when you say buy a hive, for somebody that doesn't know what that means, like what is that? Like how does that happen? They ship it to you on Amazon, or like
box,
what happens?
You have the box, and in the box you have frames. You have a brood box, which is a larger box, and then you have your honey boxes. So you have the 12-inch box, which is where the bees kind of are supposed to grow, and then above that you have where they're supposed to collect the honey in an 8-inch honey box. So those are typically what a brand new person would buy. They'd buy a brood box, and then they would buy the 2 honey boxes to go up top, and then you buy the frames. And then you have to buy the bees, and the bees are actually fairly expensive. And so a lot of times I replace the queens, and they're like, "How much does a queen bee cost you?" And I'm like, $40 for a blasted insect is what it costs you.
Right.
And that's a whole nother process, requeening a hive, and so it's a great hobby. It's a really fun hobby, and and it's not a hobby that takes a ton of time,
right?
But it does take time.
Yeah, that's for sure. So give us the 101 on the hive itself and the bees that are in the hive, and through 20 years of working with these amazing insects, I guess. I don't know. Is it even an insect?
It is an
insect. What's going on in the hive? How's it all, like high level, quick?
So you have a queen, and the queen during the the queen is the most important bee in the entire hive.
Yep.
And every bee, and of course the worker bees, the ones who do all the work are female.
Yes.
Most people don't understand that, but they're all female. The male bees don't work very much.
Yes.
They don't really work at all.
Right.
But so it's all the females that are building out the wax, because you have to have the wax to store the honey. Because if you're going to have a hive that's going to go beyond a year or two, they have to have food. And during the wintertime, they don't have access to nectar. It's cold, things like that, so they have to store food. And so that's what they know is they build out the wax to store the food. They build out the wax to be able to where the queen can lay eggs. And what's amazing is that the queen, so right now it's February, it's cold. I'm not in the beehives because if you disturb the bees at all, they keep themselves warm. And if you disturb that hive, you can actually kill a lot of the bees and even the queen. Right. So I don't touch the bees until it warms up really more in March. And then what I do is I feed sugar water and I do pollen patties. And what that does is it creates this activity. And the queen thinks, oh, it's the honey flow started, so I need to start laying eggs. Now the queen, this little tiny little insect, can during the height of the honey flow, she will lay anywhere from 1,000 to 1,800 eggs a day. A day. And about twice her body weight. And so she has attendants that are always feeding her, taking care of her, and she's just laying eggs. Yep. And that egg will go in that little wax cell 3 days, it hatches, and then that larva gets fed about 8 times a day. And until it fills up the cell, they put a cap over it, and then so many days later, the bee emerges. When that bee emerges, she turns around, cleans up her area, and she knows exactly what to do. That's just the instinct that it's just amazing.
The science, the more you learn about them, is completely mind-blowing. And just to highlight a couple of things. So how many queens are there in a hive?
Just one.
There's only one. And how long will a queen typically live?
2 to 3 years is. I typically after 2 years they don't lay a whole lot of eggs. I need lots of production. So about every 2 years, if I see that in that second year that the production's not nearly as good, I'll requeen it. That means you got to find out of 60,000 bees, you got to find the queen, you got to kill it, and then you put another queen. You get a queen box.
Yep.
And you put this box in, because if you put the queen in, they would kill her, because all the bees know which hive they're supposed to be in. Right. So you put this box, and it has this little screen, and it has a sugar plug, and she's in there with a bunch of attendants in this little box, and you put them in there, and at first they all try to kill her. And then she emits a pheromone, says, hey, we got the new queen here, everything's good. So in about 24 hours, everybody's kind of accepting of her. Meanwhile, they're eating the sugar plug. Right. By the time, in 2 or 3 days, when they eat the sugar plug, the queen comes out, and then 90% of the time she's accepted.
Yep.
And then she goes about doing her business and laying eggs. The amazing thing is if let's say if I accidentally killed the queen and didn't know, I squished her and moving stuff, within 30 minutes, everybody in the hive knows that she's dead.
Yep.
And so you got to remember, all the eggs, 99% of them are female eggs. And so what they'll quickly do is they'll quickly build out queen cells. And then they take these eggs, just a random egg, and then they put it in the queen cell. They'll do about 4 queen cells. And they'll put the egg in there, and then they fill it full of royal jelly, this white, creamy, it tastes really good. And then they just enclose it. And then about 21 days later, a queen emerges. And the first thing she does is she goes through the entire hive and kills all the other queens. One queen per hive. That's it. And then if 2 of them hatch at the time, then it's
battle royale.
It's a battle.
That's right.
And then she takes what is called her virgin flight, and so she'll fly out of the hive, and she emits a pheromone where the drones, and this is where the drones come in.
This is the sole useful purpose of the male bee.
The male bee. And she flies off, and she emits this pheromone. They can find her within a 2-mile range. Yeah. And when a bee stings you, it rips off their abdomen. And when a male bee mates, it rips off his abdomen. And so in flying, she mates with anywhere from 15 to 20 drones.
Right.
And it kills the drone in the mating process. She comes back, and she'll never mate again.
Yeah, and typically not leave the hive again.
That's exactly right, unless there's a swarm.
So going back to, which I find, I love everything about it. So that queen bee is living multiple years. Talk to us real quickly about the average lifespan of the female worker bee.
From the time it's born, it works, and maybe it's assigned to the queen and helps the queen. Most of the time, they're just assigned to the clean the cells and prepare things. Then they're assigned to be the guard bees for a while, and then they're assigned to actually go and bring in the honey.
Yeah, forage.
So they're the forage bees. The average lifespan is anywhere from 28 to 35 days. And then they can't fly. Right. They've literally worked themselves where they cannot fly anymore, to the point to where now they can't leave the hive. And if they can't fly and if they can't produce, you see the other the older or the newer bees, they'll grab them and drop them off the hive. Yep. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And then they just wander in the grass and die.
Yeah.
And it's just, and so that's why 1,500 bees a day need to be produced. So
everything can happen.
Everything can happen, and
it's amazing. And you can get down there when you're in the hive, and you can see a lot of this stuff going on where they're like exiling these, or they are outrageously clean. Like the hive inside is unbelievably clean. And so if there's anything foreign that gets left in the hive, they will work it all the way out the front door and drop it off out there.
They do.
It's pretty amazing. All right, so look, we could go on for hours and hours on how all of this works. As a beginner beekeeper, there are a bunch of questions that I typically get from people once they know, and I'm guessing your experience is the same as once they know you're a beekeeper, they just hammer you with questions. But I'm going to rapid fire you some questions and see how many of these we can get through in the last couple minutes. So Rainey, do you get stung?
I get stung A lot. I get stung hundreds of times a year. I've been stung thousands of times. And yes, it hurts every time. No, you don't ever get used to it. But beekeepers don't get arthritis. There's a in the poison of the bee thing that I'll never get arthritis. So that's the bonus.
A plus side. Has it gotten any easier over time of getting stung? Does it bother you?
Yeah, I mean it doesn't bother. It's never really bothered me. I mean, if you don't want to get stung, don't be a beekeeper. I mean, don't be surprised when you get stung.
Right.
I mean, it's just a matter of the
job.
It's of the job, and
awesome. So you alluded to this one, and it's relevant, at least here in Texas, every at least once a winter. How do the bees, and again you alluded to it, but how do the bees survive? Like the cold and the snow?
The bees can they bundle together and they create heat together, and together they work as a hive, and up in Minnesota, some of the biggest beekeeping facilities out there in the cold of Minnesota, because they know how to create heat, and that's about it.
And they vibrate to create that heat, and they keep it like between 93 and 95 degrees in there,
pretty much,
the core of that, which is simply amazing. All right, so do you sell your honey?
I don't. I give it away.
You give it away. Talk to us about that.
So it is the greatest gift, the greatest leave behind that a salesperson can ever leave behind. So I brought you your own. So this is the average what I would give a client.
Right.
I was on an airplane with a guy that we were sitting, we were talking. He owns a business. I got his name, number, and I said, I'd like to give you a call. And he says, yeah, anytime. And so I came and I left 2 bottles of honey with my card. And he's like, he called me up immediately, and it's just like, we need to get together. And he became a great client.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Another guy calls me up, and he says, hey, he said, Rainey, can I just say you're the best damn salesman I know? And I'm like, Bill, how's that possible? I've known you for 10 years, and I haven't been able to sell you anything. And he goes, but every time I have a problem, I think you can fix it. He says, you give me that honey, and every time I think about you, every time I reach for it, every time I think, and eventually after 10 years, I got him as a client.
Oh, and that's fantastic.
So this is the great leave behind. And we sent a letter out to our clients recently and just said, hey, the market's not doing good, stuff like that, but just stop by and grab a bottle of honey. And so I make about 600 or 700 of these every year, and so I always have more than enough. So
that's a thank you. And for those of you that are listening to the podcast, Rainey came armed with a nice big bottle of honey. Me and my couple highs came armed with a little jar of honey. So there's a little size discrepancy going on there, but I very much appreciate it. So that is another super popular question that I get is like, how much honey do you get? So on average, what would you say a decent performing hive will produce in a season?
So a decent performing hive will do anywhere from about 3.5 to 4.5 gallons. That's and they're about 4 feet tall and stuff like that. I've perfected the ability I've worked at it, and I know exactly how. Most of my hives are 6 to 10 feet tall.
Okay.
I've gotten the most I've gotten out of one hive is 18 gallons.
Wow.
And so I know what to do. I've studied enough to where I know the procedure on how to make sure the hives that I can maximize my bees and their production. And so I get anywhere from 50 to 75 gallons of honey.
That's a lot of honey. Look, we could probably do a whole nother podcast on how you get the honey out of the hive, which is a ton of fun and also super, super interesting. Maximizing efficiency does kind of sound like financial planning and investment management there. There might be some parallels on that front. All right, one last one. How do you feel about honey as an asset class?
Well, first of all, you need to know that what you get in the stores is pretty much garbage. It's what you find in the stores. It doesn't matter how the label is, what the label is. First of all, the U.S. produces only 1/3 of the honey that we eat. So where do we get the other 2/3? We don't know. You don't know. And the 1/3 that we do produce, most of it is just the bees are fed sugar water and they make honey from the sugar water. So to really understand, I mean, this has all the nutrients that God intended. It has the pollens and the enzymes and all the stuff that you're allergic to in the honey. And so when you eat the honey from the local guy, it's just the perfect food.
Yeah.
I have people who have it's cured ailments and stuff like that. I had a client in California that he had these spots on his skin, could never get rid of them. He started taking the honey, and they're gone.
Yeah.
And so
it's pretty amazing, and it is the only thing created by insects that humans consume. And it's like the science behind it is fantastic. They have found honey in the tombs in Egypt.
That's right.
So they are amazing little chemists because they won't cap the honey until they know that is chemically sustainable. So, all right. We could continue to geek out on this for a very long time, and I welcome the opportunity to continue the dialogue. Maybe we'll start a quarterly bee podcast for all of our friends out here. But thank you so much for being here. Super excited to have you as a part of our community. Thank you for sharing. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on this episode of Kestra Out Loud. We encourage you to come check us out on our website and listen to a lot of other great topics where you listen to all of your podcasts and on Apple Podcasts. Rainey, thanks again for being here.
You're very welcome. Pleasure.
Appreciate it.